Hey everyone, welcome to Voidmore. I hope you are all doing well. Today, I want to argue that The Amazing World of Gumball is not just a funny cartoon about a blue cat and his family. It is one of the most ambitious and layered narratives in the history of animation. Beneath the colorful characters and the absurd humor, this show built an entire mythology about a world that erases the things it considers mistakes, characters who slowly realize their reality is not real, and a forgotten background character who became the most tragic villain in modern cartoons. Across 6 seasons, Gumball quietly evolved from a silly kids show into a story about identity, existence, and what happens when the characters inside a cartoon start asking who is really in control. And by the end, it delivered one of the boldest and most heartbreaking finales any animated series has ever attempted. But before we begin, I would just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It is completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we have managed to build. Anyway, that is enough. Let us begin. The origins of Elmore, a town where anything can exist. Before we talk about the Watersons, before we talk about the villains, before we talk about the lore that made this show one of the most ambitious cartoons ever made, we need to talk about where it all takes place. Because the town of Elmore is not just a setting. It is not just a backdrop for funny moments and crazy characters. Elmore is alive. And I mean that in the most literal way possible. See, most cartoons have a town or a city where the characters live. You have Springfield in The Simpsons, you have Quahog in Family Guy, you have Dimsdale in Fairly Odd Parents. These are all just places. They exist so the characters have somewhere to be. But Elmore is different. Elmore is a town where literally anything can be a person. And when I say anything, I mean anything. Your neighbor could be a balloon. Your teacher could be a 200,000-year-old ape. The guy who works at every single store in town could be a rock. A literal rock with arms and legs and a job. Multiple jobs, actually. And nobody in Elmore thinks this is weird. That is just how life works there. And this is the first thing you need to understand about the show. The Amazing World of Gumball did not just create a cartoon town. It created an entire universe with its own rules, its own logic, and its own secrets. And those secrets run deeper than most people ever realized. So let us start with the basics. Elmore is a small suburban town that looks pretty normal on the surface. It has a school, it has a mall, it has neighborhoods, it has a park, it has a highway, it has all the things you would expect a regular town to have. But the second you look at the people living there, you realize this place is anything but normal. The citizens of Elmore are made up of every type of thing you can imagine. There are animals like cats and rabbits and fish. There are objects like balloons and toast and bananas. There are shapes, there are plants, there are ghosts, there are puppets, there are paper cutouts, and there are even characters that look like they were drawn in a completely different art style from everyone else. And all of these different types of beings just live together. They go to school together, they shop together, they argue together, they fall in love with each other. A balloon can date a cactus, a banana can be best friends with a piece of toast. Nobody questions it. Now, this might just seem like a funny, creative choice by the people who made the show. And on one level, it is. The mix of different animation styles and character designs is one of the things that makes Gumball so visually unique. You have 2D characters interacting with 3D characters. You have cartoon characters living in a world that uses real photographs as backgrounds. The show blends all of these different styles together in a way that no other cartoon has really done before. But here is where it gets interesting. As the show goes on, it starts to hint that there is a reason why Elmore is this way. There is a reason why anything can be alive there. And that reason ties into the biggest mystery of the entire show. Let me explain. Throughout the series, we start to learn that Elmore is not just a quirky town. It is a place where reality itself does not work the way it should. Things glitch. The world breaks sometimes. Characters notice patterns that do not make sense. And slowly, piece by piece, the show reveals that Elmore might not be a real place at all. It might be something that was created, something that is being controlled, something that exists inside some kind of system with rules that were written by someone or something outside of it. Now we are going to get deep into all of that as this video goes on, but for right now, what matters is that the show plants these seeds very early. Even in the first season, you can feel that something about Elmore is off. The world bends in ways it should not. Characters can survive things that should destroy them. Damage repairs itself. And every now and then the show pulls back the curtain just a tiny bit and shows you that there is more going on beneath the surface. One of the key locations in Elmore that becomes incredibly important later on is the Void. We are going to dedicate an entire section to the void later because it deserves it, but I want to mention it here because the void changes everything about how you see Elmore. The void is basically a dimension that exists outside of Elmore, and it is where things go when the world rejects them. If something is considered a mistake, if something does not fit, Elmore literally erases it and sends it to the void. People, objects, ideas, all of them can be thrown into this place and forgotten. And the scariest part is that when something gets sent to the void, everyone's memories of it get erased too. So you would never even know it was gone. That tells us something huge about Elmore. This town has a self-correcting system. It decides what belongs and what does not. And that means Elmore is not just a town. It is more like a machine, or a program, or a world that someone built with very specific rules about what can exist inside it. And if you break those rules, if you do not fit, you get deleted. But let us pull back from the deep lore for a second and talk about what makes Elmore work on a day-to-day level. Because the town is genuinely one of the funniest and most creative settings in all of animation. The heart of Elmore's daily life is Elmore Junior High. This is the school that Gumball, Darwin, and most of the main cast attend. And just like everything else in this town, the school is completely insane. The principal is a fuzzy slug named Principal Brown, who is in a relationship with one of the teachers. That teacher is Miss Simeon, and she is literally an ape who has been alive and teaching for hundreds of thousands of years. She hates her students, especially Gumball, and she has been teaching so long that she has basically given up on life. Then you have Mr. Small, the guidance counselor, who is this little fluffy cloud-looking guy obsessed with nature and spirituality, who occasionally has full-blown existential crises about the meaning of reality. The school is a mess, but it is a beautiful mess, and almost every episode features it in some way because it is the central hub where all the characters cross paths. Then there is the Elmore Mall, which is where a lot of the town's commercial life happens. And here is one of the funniest details about Elmore that the show keeps coming back to again and again. Almost every business in town is run by the same person. His name is Larry Needlemeyer. Larry is a rock, and he works at the gas station, the pizza place, the video store, the grocery store, the mall, basically everywhere. Larry is the backbone of Elmore's entire economy, and the show actually proves this. In one episode, Larry gets so fed up with everything that he quits all of his jobs at once, and when he does, Elmore literally falls apart. Society collapses, services stop, everything breaks down, because Larry was the only thing holding it all together. It is played for comedy, but it also tells you something real about how fragile Elmore is as a functioning place. The Watterson house is another key location. It is a pretty standard-looking suburban house where the main family lives. But like everything else in Elmore, it has been through absolute chaos. It has been destroyed and rebuilt more times than anyone can count. It has been the site of explosions, floods, fires, invasions, and general destruction on a level that would make any insurance company cry. But it always comes back. It always resets. And that in itself is one of those little hints the show drops about the nature of Elmore. Things break, but they fix themselves. Damage does not stick. The world seems to have a way of putting itself back together no matter what happens. And then you have the edges of Elmore, the forest outside of town, the roads leading out, the areas that characters rarely go to. The show does something really interesting with these spaces. It suggests that the further you get from the center of Elmore, the weirder things get. The outskirts are stranger, less defined, almost like the world was not fully built out there. Like whoever or whatever created Elmore put all the detail into the middle and left the edges rough and unfinished. There is also something important about how Elmore handles reality and logic. In this town, the rules of the real world apply only when it is funny for them to apply. Gravity works until it does not. Characters can get flattened, blown up, stretched, or completely destroyed, and they will be perfectly fine in the next scene. But the show is clever about this. It does not just use cartoon logic as a lazy excuse. It actually makes cartoon logic part of the world's rules. Characters in Elmore know that they can survive impossible things. They are aware of it on some level. And later in the show, some characters start to ask why. Why can they survive anything? Why does the world reset? Why do things work this way? And those questions become the foundation for the show's biggest and most important storylines. So when you put it all together, what is Elmore? It is a town where anything can be alive. It is a world that operates on cartoon logic, but is slowly becoming aware of that fact. It is a place with a hidden system that erases things it does not want. It is a setting that looks bright and colorful and fun on the surface, but has genuine mystery and darkness underneath. Elmore is not just where the story happens. Elmore is the story. The town itself is one of the biggest characters in the show, and understanding it is the key to understanding everything that comes after. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And honestly, a world this strange and this layered needs an equally strange and layered family at its center. A family that is chaotic enough to match a town where bananas go to school and rocks hold down 9 jobs. A family that somehow, despite being a complete disaster, holds together through love, stubbornness, and the sheer refusal to quit on each other. And that brings us to the Wattersons, the most dysfunctional and lovable family in all of animation. Section 2, the Watterson family. Meet the most dysfunctional family in animation. Every great show needs a great family at its center. The Simpsons have Homer and Marge and Bart. The Griffins have Peter and Lois and Stewie. But none of those families are quite like the Wattersons. Because the Wattersons are not just funny. They are not just chaotic. They are a family that should not work at all. On paper, everything about them is a disaster. The dad is so lazy that him getting a job literally breaks reality. The mom carries the entire household on her back through sheer rage and willpower. The oldest son is a loudmouth troublemaker who creates problems everywhere he goes. The middle child is a fish, a literal fish who grew legs and walked out of his bowl one day. And the youngest is a 4-year-old rabbit who is smarter than every other member of the family combined. None of this should work, but it does. And the reason it works is because underneath all the chaos and the screaming and the explosions and the nonsense, the Wattersons genuinely love each other. And that love is what holds the entire show together. So let us go through each member of this family one by one, because understanding who they are is essential to understanding everything else that happens in this show. First up is the star of the show himself, Gumball Christopher Watterson. Yes, his middle name is Christopher, and actually, his real first name is not even Gumball. It is Zach. His full birth name is Zach Christopher Watterson. But we will get to that whole situation in a moment. Gumball is a 12-year-old blue cat. He is the eldest child of the Watterson family, and he is the character that the entire show revolves around. Now, Gumball is a lot of things. He is loud, he is dramatic, he is impulsive, he schemes and plans and makes terrible decisions on a daily basis. He has an ego that is way too big for someone who fails at almost everything he tries. He thinks he is cooler than he actually is. He thinks he is smarter than he actually is. He thinks he is better looking than he actually is. And the show constantly reminds him that none of those things are true. But here is the thing about Gumball. Underneath all that bravado and all that confidence, he is deeply insecure. The show reveals this again and again. Gumball is terrified of being nobody. He is terrified of not mattering. He wants to be special. He wants to be important. He wants people to notice him. And when they do not, it genuinely hurts him. This makes him way more layered than your typical cartoon main character. He is not just the funny kid who gets into trouble. He is a kid who is trying really hard to figure out who he is and keeps messing it up along the way. And speaking of identity, there is a whole episode dedicated to this exact struggle. The show reveals that Gumball's birth name was actually Zach, and at one point, the Zach personality starts to take over. Zach is everything bad about Gumball dialed up to 11. He is arrogant, selfish, and cruel. Gumball literally has to fight against this other version of himself to keep his identity. He rejects the name Zach and chooses Gumball because Gumball, for all his flaws, is the version of himself that cares about other people. It is a surprisingly deep moment for a show about a blue cat. Next we have Darwin, Raglan, Caspian, Ahab, Poseidon, Nicodemus, Watterson III. Yes, that is his full name. Darwin is a small orange fish, and his story is one of the most unique origin stories in all of animation. Darwin started out as the family pet. He was just a regular goldfish living in a bowl. But one day, Darwin grew legs. He sprouted arms. He developed lungs that let him breathe air. He grew in size, and he walked right out of that fishbowl and into the family. The Wattersons did not question it. They did not take him to a scientist or freak out about it. They just accepted it and adopted him as their son. That is the most Watterson thing possible. Darwin is the emotional heart of the family, and honestly, the emotional heart of the entire show. He is sweet, he is kind, he is caring, and he always tries to do the right thing. If Gumball is the chaos, Darwin is the conscience. He is the one who tells Gumball when he is going too far. He is the one who feels guilty when they do something wrong. He is the moral compass that keeps the show grounded even when everything around him is completely insane. But do not let that sweetness fool you. Darwin has a dark side. When Darwin gets pushed too far, when someone hurts the people he loves, he can flip a switch and become genuinely intimidating. There are moments in the show where Darwin's anger comes out, and it is almost scary because it is so different from his usual personality. He is not just the nice one. He is the nice one who chooses to be nice, and when he stops choosing that, look out. Then we have Anais Watterson. Anais is the youngest member of the family. She is a 4-year-old pink rabbit, and she is by far the smartest person in the house. Actually, she might be the smartest person in all of Elmore. Anais is a genius-level intellect trapped in a family of people who barely know what they are doing on any given day. She often serves as the voice of reason, pointing out the obvious solutions to problems that the rest of her family cannot see. She reads books, she understands complex ideas, and she frequently has to bail her older brothers out of situations they created because they did not think things through. But Anais is not just the smart kid who rolls her eyes at everyone else. She is also 4 years old. And the show never forgets that. She still has a stuffed animal named Daisy the donkey that she is deeply attached to. She still has moments of childish behavior and tantrums. She still wants her family's attention and approval, even though she is intellectually miles ahead of them. That contrast between her intelligence and her age makes her one of the most interesting characters on the show. She is a little kid who can outsmart everyone in the room, but still needs her mom at the end of the day. Now we get to the parents, and this is where the Watterson family gets really interesting. Nicole Watterson is the mother of the family. She is a blue cat, just like Gumball, and she is, without question, the most powerful character in the entire show. And I do not mean that in a vague sense. I mean, Nicole is physically, mentally, and emotionally the strongest person in Elmore. She can fight. She can really fight. There are multiple episodes where Nicole goes up against serious threats and absolutely destroys them. She has punched through walls. She has outrun cars. She has taken on entire groups of people and won without breaking a sweat. The show treats her strength almost like a superpower, and other characters in Elmore are genuinely afraid of her when she gets angry. But Nicole is not just strong in the physical sense. She is the person who holds the Watterson family together in every possible way. She is the one who works. She is the one who pays the bills. She is the one who cleans the house and makes sure the kids get to school and deals with every crisis that comes up. She does all of this while married to a man who is essentially a giant child himself. Nicole carries the weight of the entire household on her shoulders. And she does it because she loves her family more than anything in the world. But that weight takes a toll. The show does not hide the fact that Nicole is stressed, exhausted, and sometimes pushed to her absolute breaking point. Her anger is legendary in Elmore for a reason. She has been carrying too much for too long. Nicole works at the Rainbow Factory, which is her main job throughout the series. What exactly happens at the Rainbow Factory is never fully explained, but it is a regular source of stress and frustration for her. She is an employee there, working hard to keep money coming in for a family that spends it as fast as she can make it. And then there is Richard Watterson. Richard is a large pink rabbit, and he is the father of the family. And how do I put this nicely? Richard is not smart. Richard is really not smart. He is lazy on a level that almost defies explanation. He sits on the couch and watches TV and eats, and that is pretty much his entire existence on most days. He does not work, he does not clean, he barely functions as an adult human being, or adult rabbit, whatever he is. But here is where Richard gets fascinating. The show establishes that Richard's laziness is not just a character trait, it is almost a fundamental law of the universe. In the episode called The Job, Richard actually gets a job delivering pizza. You would think this would be a good thing, a win for the family. But no. The moment Richard starts working, reality itself begins to fall apart. The sky cracks, colors bleed, the world starts glitching and breaking in ways that make no sense. The show is literally telling us that Richard being lazy is somehow necessary for the universe to function. Him not working is not a flaw, it is a requirement. The fabric of reality depends on Richard Watterson sitting on that couch doing absolutely nothing. Richard is also incredibly naive and childlike. He believes things that no adult should believe. He falls for obvious tricks. He makes decisions that a 5-year-old would think twice about. But he is also, in his own weird way, a good father. He loves his kids. He loves Nicole. He may not contribute much in terms of practical help, but he brings joy and warmth and silliness to the family. He is the fun parent, the one who will go along with any crazy plan, the one who will play with his kids and be just as excited as they are about dumb things. And in a family as stressed and chaotic as the Wattersons, that counts for something. Together, the Wattersons are a mess. There is no getting around that. They are loud, they are destructive, they are broke most of the time, and they cause more problems than they solve on any given day. Their house gets destroyed regularly, their neighbors cannot stand them. The school is constantly dealing with the fallout of whatever Gumball and Darwin did that week. By every normal measure, this family is a disaster. But they work. They work because every single member of that family, for all their flaws, would do anything for each other. Nicole would fight an army for her kids. Richard would stumble through any danger to protect his family, even if he does not fully understand what is going on. Gumball and Darwin would go to the ends of the earth for each other. Aeneas, for all her frustration with her family's stupidity, loves them fiercely and would never trade them for anything. The Wattersons are broken in 100 different ways, but they are never broken apart, and that is what makes them special. That is what makes them the perfect family to anchor a show as wild and unpredictable as this one. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And the thing is, as crazy as the Wattersons seem on the surface, their depth only grows when you start digging into their backstories, especially Nicole. Because when you learn where she came from, what she went through, and what she had to survive just to become the person she is, everything about her makes sense. And honestly, it will break your heart a little. Section 3. Nicole's backstory, the making of Elmore's most dangerous mom. We just talked about how Nicole Watterson is the strongest character in all of Elmore, how she holds her family together through sheer willpower and force, how she can fight like nobody else in the show, and how even the toughest characters in town are terrified of her when she gets angry. But strength like that does not come from nowhere. People are not born that intense, that driven, that ready to fight the entire world at a moment's notice. Something makes them that way. And when the show finally pulls back the curtain on Nicole's past, everything clicks into place. Because Nicole's childhood was not happy, it was not warm, it was not safe. And the woman she became makes complete sense once you understand the girl she used to be. Nicole grew up as Nicole Senecourt. That was her maiden name before she married Richard and became a Watterson. Her parents were Daniel and Mary Senecourt, and to put it simply, they were not good parents. They were not abusive in the loud, obvious way you might expect. They were cold. They were controlling. They were the kind of parents who made their child feel like she was never good enough, like nothing she did would ever meet their standards, like she was more of a burden than a blessing. And that kind of quiet, constant emotional pressure can do just as much damage as anything else. The show gives us glimpses of Nicole's childhood across several episodes, but some of the most important ones are the choices and the parents. These episodes do not just hint at what Nicole went through, they show it. And what they show is a little girl who was essentially alone in the world. Nicole did not have friends growing up. She was isolated. Part of this was because of her parents and the way they raised her, keeping her on a tight leash, controlling who she could talk to and what she could do. But part of it was also because Nicole was different. Even as a kid, she had that intensity, that fire inside her that made other people uncomfortable. She was not the kind of child who blended in and went along with things. She felt everything deeply, and she reacted to everything strongly. And in a world that wanted her to be quiet and small, that made her an outsider. Her parents did not help with this. Instead of supporting her, instead of encouraging her to be herself, they tried to mold her into something she was not. They wanted her to be obedient and controlled and proper. They wanted a daughter who followed the rules and did not make waves. And Nicole tried. She really tried to be what they wanted. But she could not shut off who she was. She could not turn off the fire. And the more she tried to force herself into a box she did not fit into, the more frustrated and angry she became. This is where Nicole's famous rage comes from. It is not random. It is not just a funny character trait the writers gave her for comedy. Nicole's anger is the result of years of being told that who she is was not acceptable. Years of being made to feel small by the people who were supposed to lift her up. When you spend your whole childhood being controlled and dismissed and told you are not enough, that pressure builds. And eventually, it has to go somewhere. For Nicole, it became fuel. It became the fire that drives her to protect her family with everything she has, because she knows what it feels like to not be protected. She knows what it feels like to be alone, and she swore that her kids would never feel that way. Now, here is where the story gets really beautiful, because in the middle of all that loneliness and pressure and pain, Nicole met someone. She met Richard. The episode The Choices shows us how Nicole and Richard first crossed paths, and it is one of the most emotionally powerful episodes in the entire series. The show frames it as a look at all the different paths Nicole's life could have taken. Every choice she made, every turn in the road, could have led her somewhere different. She could have had a completely different life. She could have been successful in the traditional sense. She could have been rich. She could have had a career that impressed her parents. The show literally shows us these alternate timelines, and in every single one where she does not end up with Richard, she is miserable. She might have money or status or her parents' approval, but she is empty. She is alone in a different way. She has everything except the one thing that actually matters. And then there is the timeline where she meets Richard. And Richard is, well, Richard. He is goofy, he is not smart, he has no ambition, he has no money, he has nothing that Nicole's parents would consider valuable. But he has one thing that nobody else in Nicole's life ever gave her. He makes her happy. Genuinely, simply happy. Richard does not try to control her. He does not try to change her. He does not look at her intensity and her fire and see a problem that needs to be fixed. He just loves her, exactly as she is. No conditions, no expectations, just pure, honest, uncomplicated love. And for someone who spent her entire childhood being told she was not enough, That was everything. Richard was the first person who ever made Nicole feel like she was okay just being herself. And that is why she chose him. Not because he was the best option on paper. He was probably the worst option on paper. But he was the only person who ever made her feel truly seen and truly accepted. Nicole's parents did not agree, and this is where things get painful. Daniel and Mary Senecourt did not approve of Richard, not even a little bit. They looked at him and saw everything they did not want for their daughter. He was lazy, he was poor, he was uneducated, he was everything they considered beneath them, and they made their feelings very clear. They did not just disapprove of the relationship, they essentially gave Nicole a choice, them or him. And Nicole chose Richard. That decision cost her. Her parents pulled away. The relationship between Nicole and her parents became strained to the point of being almost non-existent. The episode The Parents deals directly with this, when Nicole's parents finally come to visit, and the tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Years of hurt and resentment and unspoken words come flooding out. Nicole's parents look at the Watterson household, at the chaos and the mess and the financial struggles, and they see everything they feared. They see proof that Nicole made the wrong choice. And Nicole has to stand there and defend the life she built, the family she created, the man she chose, against the judgment of the people whose approval she spent her whole childhood chasing. It is one of the most emotionally raw moments in the entire show. Because on some level, no matter how strong Nicole is, no matter how much she has built for herself, there is still a part of her that wants her parents to be proud of her. There is still that little girl inside her who just wanted them to say she was good enough. And they never really do. Not fully. Not in the way she needs. But here is what makes Nicole such an incredible character. She does not let that break her. She takes all of that pain, all of that rejection, all of that loneliness from her childhood, and she turns it into something powerful. She becomes the parent that her parents never were. Everything they failed to give her, she gives to her kids. Her parents were cold. Nicole is fiercely warm with her family. Her parents were controlling. Nicole lets her kids be themselves, even when they are driving her absolutely crazy. Her parents made her feel like she was not enough. Nicole makes sure her kids know they are loved every single day, even when she is stressed, even when she is angry, even when everything is falling apart around her. That is what makes Nicole Watterson one of the best written characters in all of animation. She is not just the strong mom who punches things and yells. She is a woman who built herself from nothing, who took a childhood full of pain and turned it into a life full of love. She chose a path that everyone told her was wrong, and she made it work through sheer determination and force of will. She is not perfect. She yells too much. She gets too angry. She carries too much weight and does not ask for help enough. But everything she does for her family. Every ounce of that legendary strength exists because she refuses to let her children feel what she felt growing up. And the show makes all of this feel real. It does not spell it out in some dramatic monologue. It shows it through small moments and flashbacks and the way Nicole reacts to things. The way she flinches when her parents criticize her. The way she holds her kids a little tighter after a fight. The way she looks at Richard sometimes with this expression that says, "I chose you, and I would choose you again every single time." It is subtle, and it is powerful, and it is the kind of character writing that most cartoons do not even attempt. Nicole's physical strength, her ability to fight, her speed and power that borders on superhuman, all of that is funny and entertaining on the surface, but it represents something deeper. Nicole had to be strong, because nobody was ever strong for her. She had to become her own protector, her own supporter, her own everything. And now she is all of that for the people she loves. She became the person she needed as a child so that her children would never need to become that for themselves. Her parents, Daniel and Mary, eventually do show up in the Wattersons' lives, and the show handles that complicated relationship with surprising honesty. It does not give us a perfect happy ending where everyone hugs and forgives and everything is fine. It shows us what real family tension looks like. The awkward silences, the passive-aggressive comments, the moments where old wounds open up again no matter how much time has passed. It is messy and uncomfortable and true to life in a way that hits hard. Nicole Watterson started with nothing. She had cold parents, no friends, and a world that wanted her to be small. She ended up with a family that loves her, a home that is chaotic but full of warmth, and a life that she built on her own terms. And even though that life is messy and loud and constantly on the verge of falling apart, it is hers. She chose it, and she would choose it again. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Nicole is only half of the equation, because if we want to understand the Watterson family completely, we need to understand the other parent too. And Richard's story is just as surprising as Nicole's, because underneath all the laziness and the silliness and the seemingly endless stupidity, there is a reason Richard is the way he is. And that reason starts with the two people who raised him. Section 4. Richard's Origins. How laziness became a superpower. We just learned about Nicole's backstory, how she grew up in a cold and controlling household, how she had to become strong because nobody was ever strong for her, how she built a life from nothing and turned her pain into love for her family. And we said that to understand the Wattersons completely, we need to understand the other parent too. So now it is time to talk about Richard. Because as easy as it is to look at Richard Watterson and just see the funny, lazy dad, his story goes a lot deeper than that. And honestly, once you understand where Richard comes from, you stop laughing at him quite so much and start feeling for him instead. Richard Bucket Watterson is a large pink rabbit. He is Nicole's husband and the father of Gumball, Darwin, and Annis. And on the surface, Richard is one of the simplest characters on the show. He is lazy, he is not smart, he eats too much, he watches too much TV, he does not work, he does not clean, he barely functions as a responsible adult. If you described Richard to someone who had never seen the show, they would probably say he sounds like the typical dumb dad character that you see in 100 different cartoons and sitcoms. And in some ways, he is. But the Amazing World of Gumball does something really clever with Richard. It takes that dumb dad stereotype and asks a question that most shows never bother to ask. Why is he like this? What happened to him that made him this way? And the answer is surprisingly sad. Richard was raised by his mother, Granny JoJo, and if Nicole's parents were too cold and too distant, Granny JoJo was the exact opposite problem. She was too close. Way too close. Granny JoJo is one of the most overprotective parents in the history of animation. She smothered Richard with attention and control from the day he was born. She did everything for him. She made every decision for him. She shielded him from every challenge, every difficulty, every situation where he might have to think for himself, or struggle, or fail. On the surface, that might sound like love, and in Granny JoJo's mind, it probably was love. She thought she was protecting her son, but what she actually did was cripple him. When you never let a child do anything on their own, when you never let them fail, when you never let them figure things out for themselves, you do not create a safe and happy person. You create a helpless one. Richard never learned how to take care of himself because Granny JoJo never gave him the chance. He never learned responsibility because she handled everything. He never developed basic life skills because she did all of it for him. By the time Richard was an adult, he was essentially a child in a grown man's body. Not because he was stupid, though he is definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed, but because he was never allowed to grow up. And the reason Granny JoJo was so overprotective ties into the other half of Richard's backstory, which is his father. Richard's dad is a man named Frankie Watterson, and Frankie is, to put it bluntly, a terrible person. Frankie is a con man, a grifter, a dishonest, selfish man who manipulates people for his own gain. And at some point, when Richard was young, Frankie abandoned the family. He just left, walked out on Granny JoJo and Richard, and did not look back. That abandonment destroyed Granny JoJo, and her response to that pain was to hold on to Richard as tight as she possibly could. She lost Frankie. She was not going to lose her son too. So she wrapped him up in layers and layers of protection and control, making sure he would never leave her, making sure nothing in the outside world could ever hurt him or take him away. It came from a place of genuine fear and genuine love, but the result was devastating. Richard grew up without a father and with a mother who would not let him breathe. He had no role model for what a man was supposed to be. He had no example of responsibility or independence. All he had was a mother who did everything for him, and a father-shaped hole in his life that never got filled. The show actually brings Frankie back in later episodes, and it is not a happy reunion. Frankie has not changed. He is still a con man. He still tries to manipulate and take advantage of people, including his own family. Richard has to confront the fact that his father is not a good person and never really was. And Granny JoJo has to deal with the return of the man who broke her heart and set her on the path of smothering her son into helplessness. It is messy and complicated, and the show does not try to wrap it up with a neat little bow. Some damage does not get fully repaired. Some people do not change. And sometimes you just have to accept your parents for who they are, flaws and all, and try to do better with your own family. Now here is where Richard's story takes a turn from sad to genuinely fascinating, because the show does not just give Richard a tragic backstory and leave it at that. It takes his laziness, his defining characteristic, and turns it into something that is actually important to the fabric of Elmore itself. In the episode called The Job, Richard gets a job. This should be a good thing. Nicole has been carrying the financial weight of the entire family for years. Richard finally getting off the couch and contributing should be a cause for celebration. And at first, the family is excited. Richard becomes a pizza delivery man. He gets in the car, he starts delivering pizzas, simple enough. But then things start to go wrong, and not just a little wrong, catastrophically, reality-breakingly wrong. As Richard continues to do his job, the world around him starts falling apart. The sky begins to crack. Colors start bleeding and mixing together in ways that make no sense. Objects lose their shape. The laws of physics stop working. Reality is literally unraveling at the seams. And the show makes it very clear that this is happening because Richard has a job. The universe cannot handle Richard Watterson being a productive member of society. His laziness is not just a personality trait. It is a fundamental part of how Elmore works. The world needs Richard to be lazy. If he stops being lazy, everything breaks. Now, the show plays this for comedy, and it is genuinely hilarious to watch the world fall apart because one man decided to deliver some pizzas. But think about what the show is actually saying here. Richard's laziness is built into the structure of reality. It is a rule. It is a law of the universe, just like gravity or time. The world was designed, or at least functions, in a way that requires Richard Watterson to sit on his couch and do nothing. And if you remember what we talked about in the first section, about how Elmore seems to be a world with specific rules built into it, a world that corrects itself and erases things that do not fit, then Richard's situation takes on a whole new meaning. Somebody or something set up these rules, and one of those rules is that Richard does not work. This is one of those moments where Gumball takes what looks like a simple joke and reveals that it is actually a piece of the larger puzzle. Richard being lazy is not just funny, it is lore. It is evidence that Elmore operates on a set of predetermined rules that the characters cannot break without consequences. And that idea, the idea that the world has rules that were set by some outside force, becomes one of the most important themes of the entire show. But beyond the lore and the cosmic significance of his laziness, Richard is also just a genuinely endearing character on a personal level. Yes, he is useless in most practical ways. Yes, Nicole does all the heavy lifting. Yes, he makes terrible decisions on a daily basis. But Richard has something that a lot of more competent and successful characters do not have. He has pure, unconditional love for his family, and he shows it constantly. Richard is the dad who will play with his kids for hours without getting bored. He is the dad who will go along with any wild scheme Gumball and Darwin come up with, not because he does not know better, but because he genuinely thinks it sounds fun. He is the dad who gets excited about the same things his kids get excited about. He does not talk down to them. He does not dismiss their interests. He meets them exactly where they are, which is easy for him because emotionally, he is pretty much right there with them. And his relationship with Nicole is one of the most interesting dynamics on the show. On paper, it makes no sense. Nicole is driven, hardworking, intense, and capable. Richard is none of those things. She could have had a different life with a different person. The show literally showed us that in the choices. She could have married someone successful and impressive and everything her parents wanted for her, but she chose Richard. Because Richard gives her something that nobody else ever did. He gives her peace. He gives her simplicity. He gives her a place where she does not have to be strong all the time, where she can just be Nicole, not the fighter, not the provider, not the one holding everything together, just herself. Richard's simplicity is not a weakness in their relationship. It is the balance that Nicole needs. She carries the weight, and he lightens it just by being himself. That does not mean their relationship is perfect. It is not. Nicole gets frustrated with Richard constantly. She loses her temper with him. She wishes he would do more, contribute more, be more of a partner, and less of another child she has to take care of. And those frustrations are valid, but at the end of the day, when things get really bad, when the family is truly in danger, Richard steps up in his own way. He may not be smart about it, he may not be graceful about it, but he shows up. He tries. And for Nicole, who spent her whole childhood with people who did not show up for her at all, that means something. Richard is a character who could have been nothing more than a punchline. The fat, lazy dad who sits on the couch and eats and does nothing. 100 other shows have that character and do nothing interesting with him. But Gumball gives Richard a backstory that explains why he is the way he is. It gives his laziness a cosmic significance that ties into the show's deeper mythology. And it shows that even the most seemingly useless person can have value, can have love to give, and can be exactly what someone else needs. He is not a good provider. He is not a role model in any traditional sense. He is barely a functioning adult. But he is a good father in the ways that matter most. He loves his kids without conditions. He makes them laugh. He makes their lives brighter just by being his ridiculous self. And in a town as strange and unpredictable as Elmore, maybe that is exactly the kind of dad the Watterson kids need. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So now we have the full picture of the Watterson parents. Nicole, forged by pain and loneliness into the strongest person in Elmore. Richard, sheltered into helplessness, but carrying a heart big enough to balance out his wife's intensity. Together, they created a family that is chaotic and broke and loud and messy, but full of more love than most families could ever dream of. And at the center of that family, holding the whole thing together with a bond that the show tests again and again, but never breaks, are two brothers, a blue cat and an orange fish. And their relationship is the true heart of everything this show is about. Section 5. Gumball and Darwin's bond, the heart of the show. We have talked about the Watterson parents. We have talked about Nicole's painful childhood and the strength it forged in her. We have talked about Richard's smothered upbringing and how his laziness is somehow woven into the fabric of reality itself. But now we need to talk about the relationship that sits at the very center of this entire show. The one that every episode orbits around. The one that the writers come back to again and again because it is the emotional foundation that holds everything together. And that is the bond between Gumball and Darwin. Because here's the thing. You can have the craziest world in animation. You can have the deepest lore and the wildest side characters and the most ambitious meta storylines. But none of that matters if the audience does not care about the people at the center of it. And the reason people care about Gumball as a show, the reason it has the fan base it has, the reason people are still talking about it years after it ended, is because the relationship between these two brothers feels real. It feels earned. It feels like something worth protecting. And the show knows that. The show treats their bond as the most important thing in the entire universe of Elmore. And honestly, it might be. Let us start from the beginning. Because Gumball and Darwin's relationship did not start the way most sibling relationships start. Darwin was not born into the family. He was not adopted through normal means. Darwin was the family pet. He was a goldfish, a regular, small, ordinary goldfish, swimming around in a bowl in the Watterson house. That was his entire existence. A pet fish in a family of cats and rabbits. And then something miraculous happened. Darwin evolved. He grew legs. He grew arms. He grew bigger. He developed the ability to breathe air. He developed the ability to speak. He walked out of that fishbowl on his own 2 new feet and became a member of the family. Not a pet, a member, a son, a brother. The show never gives a detailed scientific explanation for how this happened. It does not need to. This is Elmore. Weird things happen. Anything can be alive. And in a town where a balloon and a cactus can be classmates, a fish growing legs and joining the family is honestly not even the strangest thing that has happened. The Wattersons accepted it immediately. They did not question it. They did not run tests. They just opened their arms and said, okay, you are one of us now. And from that moment on, Darwin was a Watterson. But of all the relationships Darwin formed within the family, his bond with Gumball was the strongest from the very start. And that makes sense when you think about it. Gumball was the one who had Darwin as his pet fish. Gumball was the one who fed him and talked to him and spent time with him before he ever grew legs. In a way, Gumball was the first person who ever loved Darwin. And Darwin has never forgotten that. Their bond is not just the bond of brothers who grew up together. It is the bond of 2 people who chose each other. Gumball chose Darwin when he was just a fish in a bowl, and Darwin chose Gumball when he became something more. Now, what makes their relationship so special is not just that they are close. Lots of cartoon siblings are close. What makes Gumball and Darwin special is how different they are, and how those differences both strengthen and challenge their bond. Gumball is selfish. That is not an insult. It is just true. He thinks about himself first in most situations. He wants attention, he wants credit, he wants to be the hero of every story. He schemes and manipulates and takes shortcuts. He drags Darwin into situations without thinking about the consequences. He sometimes uses Darwin's loyalty and kindness to his own advantage, knowing that Darwin will go along with almost anything because Darwin loves him. Darwin, on the other hand, is selfless almost to a fault. He cares about other people's feelings, he tries to do the right thing, he thinks about consequences, he feels guilty when they do something wrong, even if it was entirely Gumball's idea. Darwin is the conscience of the duo. He is the voice in Gumball's ear saying, maybe we should not do this. Maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe we should think about how this affects other people. And Gumball ignores that voice about 80% of the time. This creates a dynamic that is both hilarious and emotionally complex, because Darwin is not just Gumball's brother. He is Gumball's moral compass. Without Darwin, Gumball would be so much worse. He would be meaner, more selfish, more reckless, more destructive. Darwin pulls him back from the edge constantly. He softens Gumball's worst impulses and brings out his best qualities. And Gumball, whether he admits it or not, needs that. He needs someone who believes he can be better than he is. He needs someone who sees the good in him even when he is being his worst self. But the relationship is not one-sided. Darwin needs Gumball too. Because for all of Darwin's kindness and moral clarity, he can be passive. He can be too agreeable, too willing to go along with things, too scared to stand up for himself. Gumball gives Darwin courage. Gumball gives Darwin adventure. Gumball pushes Darwin out of his comfort zone and into situations where Darwin discovers things about himself that he never would have found on his own. Without Gumball, Darwin would probably live a very safe, very quiet, very boring life. And deep down, Darwin does not want that. He wants the chaos. He wants the adventure. He just also wants someone to share it with. The show tests this bond constantly, and those tests are where the relationship really shines. There are episodes where Gumball takes Darwin for granted, and Darwin finally snaps. There are episodes where Darwin questions whether Gumball actually values him or just uses him. There are episodes where jealousy creeps in, where one of them feels replaced or left behind or not important enough. These moments are uncomfortable because they feel real. Anyone who has ever had a close sibling or a best friend knows what it feels like to wonder if the other person cares as much as you do. And the show does not shy away from putting that fear front and center. But every single time their bond is tested, it comes back stronger. That is the pattern. Things get hard, they fight, they say things they do not mean, they hurt each other in ways that only someone you truly love can hurt you. And then they find their way back. Because at the end of the day, Gumball and Darwin are not just brothers. They are each other's person. They are the one constant in each other's lives. Everything else in Elmore can be crazy and unpredictable and terrifying, but as long as they have each other, they can handle it. There is also something really interesting about how the show handles Darwin's darker side. Because most of the time, Darwin is the sweet one. He is the kind one. He is the one who smiles and forgives and sees the best in people. But there are moments, specific moments, where Darwin gets pushed too far, where someone hurts him or someone he loves in a way that crosses a line. And when that happens, Darwin changes. The sweetness drops away and something much harder and much colder takes its place. Darwin's anger is scary precisely because it is so rare. When Gumball gets angry, it is loud and dramatic and kind of funny because that is just who Gumball is. He is always at an 11. But when Darwin gets angry, it is quiet and intense and deeply unsettling because you know that for Darwin to reach that point, something truly terrible must have happened. The show uses this sparingly, which is smart because it means every time it happens, it has real impact. It reminds you that Darwin is not just the nice sidekick. He is a full person with a full range of emotions, and just because he chooses to be kind does not mean he is incapable of being anything else. And this connects to something larger about Darwin's character that the show explores over time. Darwin chose to be good. That is important. He was not born good. He was not programmed to be nice. He looked at the world, he saw how people can be cruel and selfish and dishonest, and he made a conscious choice to be kind anyway. That choice is what makes Darwin heroic. Not because he does not have darkness in him, he does, but because every day he decides not to let that darkness win. He decides to be patient when Gumball is being difficult. He decides to forgive when people hurt him. He decides to see the best in others even when they do not deserve it. And that is a much more powerful kind of goodness than just being naturally sweet. Gumball, to his credit, recognizes what he has in Darwin, even if he does not always show it. There are moments scattered throughout the series where Gumball drops the ego and the bravado and just lets Darwin know how much he means to him. These moments are not big or dramatic. They are quiet. A look, a word, a small gesture that says, "I know I do not tell you this enough, but you are the most important person in my life." And those moments hit hard because they are so rare from a character who spends 90% of his time being loud and self-centered. The show also explores what happens when they are separated. And every time it happens, both of them fall apart in different ways. Gumball without Darwin becomes more reckless, more selfish, more lost. Darwin without Gumball becomes more anxious, more passive, more unsure of himself. They complete each other in a way that is not codependent in an unhealthy sense, but in the sense that they bring out the best in each other. They are better together than they are apart, and the show proves this over and over again. Their dynamic extends into how they interact with the rest of Elmore too. Together, they are a team. They face every challenge side by side, whether it is dealing with school bullies, surviving one of Nicole's rage episodes, navigating their dad's incompetence, or confronting the literal threats to reality that emerge in later seasons. They bicker and argue and drive each other crazy, but when it matters, when things get truly dangerous, they are always on the same side. Always. And I think that is why this relationship resonates with people so much. It is not idealized. It is not perfect. It is messy and complicated and sometimes painful, but it is unbreakable. And in a world as chaotic and unpredictable as Elmore, where anything can happen and nothing is guaranteed, having one person you can always count on is the most valuable thing in the world. Gumball has that in Darwin, and Darwin has that in Gumball. And no matter what the show throws at them, that never changes. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So we have met the family. We have understood their histories, their dynamics, their strengths and their flaws. We have seen how each Watterson is shaped by their past and how they fit together like mismatched puzzle pieces that somehow form a complete picture. But now we need to leave the Watterson house for a moment and go somewhere much darker. Somewhere that most Elmore residents do not even know exists. A place where the things the world does not want get thrown away and forgotten. A place that changes everything you think you know about how Elmore works. We need to talk about the Void. Section 6. The Void. Elmore's darkest secret. We have spent a lot of time getting to know the Wattersons, their personalities, their backstories, their relationships, and all of that is the heart of the show. But now we need to step outside the family and look at the world itself, because Elmore has a secret. A big one. A secret so dark and so disturbing that most of the people living in Elmore do not even know it exists. And when Gumball and Darwin stumble onto it, it changes everything. It changes how you see the town. It changes how you see the show. And it opens the door to some of the biggest questions the series will ever ask. We need to talk about the Void. The Void is introduced in the episode called, fittingly, The Void. And the way the show reveals it is brilliant because it starts with something really simple. Gumball, Darwin, and their school counselor, Mr. Small, notice that something is wrong. Someone is missing. A classmate named Molly. She was there, she was part of their lives, and now she is just gone. But it is not just that she moved away or transferred schools, it is like she never existed. Nobody remembers her. Her desk is gone. Her name is not on any list. There is no trace of her anywhere. The world has completely erased any evidence that Molly was ever a part of Elmore. Now, most people in town do not notice this. That is the scariest part. When the Void takes someone, it does not just remove them physically. It removes them from everyone's memory. You do not miss someone you cannot remember. You do not look for someone you have forgotten. The erasure is total. If Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small had not somehow held on to their memories of Molly, nobody would have ever known she was gone. Nobody would have ever looked for her. She would have just ceased to exist and the world would have moved on like nothing happened. But they do remember. And that sends them on a journey to find out where Molly went. And what they discover is the Void. The Void is a place that exists outside of Elmore. It is not another town or another country. It is another dimension entirely. A space between spaces. A place where things go when the world decides they do not belong anymore. And when Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small find their way into the Void, what they see is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. The Void looks like a vast, surreal, endless space, filled with floating objects and fragments of things that were cast out of the world. It has a dreamlike quality to it, almost like a painting that does not follow the rules of normal reality. Things float, things shift, the landscape does not make consistent sense. It is beautiful in a strange, eerie way, but it is also clearly a place of exile, a dumping ground, a cosmic garbage bin for everything that Elmore no longer wants. And the things inside the Void are not just random junk. They are things that the world considered mistakes, failed ideas, things that did not work out. things that were considered boring or pointless or unsuccessful. The show fills the void with references to real-world things that were abandoned or forgotten. Old technology, failed products, discontinued items, things that society moved on from and left behind. And mixed in with all of that are people, living, conscious beings who were thrown into the void because the world decided they were not good enough to exist anymore. Molly is one of them. She was sent to the void because, in the cruel logic of this system, she was considered boring, not interesting enough to justify her existence in Elmore, not entertaining enough to keep around. The world looked at her and decided she was a mistake, and it threw her away. And she has been floating in this empty dimension ever since, forgotten by everyone who ever knew her, erased from a world that decided she did not matter. That is dark. For a cartoon aimed at kids and families, that is incredibly dark. The idea that there is a system built into the world that judges whether or not you deserve to exist, and if it decides you do not, it erases you and makes everyone forget you were ever there. That is not just a scary concept for a cartoon. That is a scary concept, period. Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small manage to find Molly in the void and try to bring her back, but escaping the void is not easy. The void does not want to let go of the things it has taken. It pulls at them. It tries to keep them there. The world has decided these things do not belong, and the void exists to enforce that decision. Getting out requires a fight, a real struggle against a system that was designed to be permanent. They do manage to escape with Molly. They bring her back to Elmore, and she is restored. But the experience leaves a mark, because now Gumball and Darwin know something that almost nobody else in Elmore knows. They know that the world they live in has a hidden mechanism for erasing things. They know that their reality is not as free and open as it seems. There are rules. There is a system, and that system has the power to decide who gets to exist and who does not. This is a turning point for the show. Before The Void, Gumball was a funny, clever, sometimes absurd cartoon about a blue cat and his family getting into wild situations. After The Void, the show has a new layer, a layer of mystery and unease that sits underneath everything. Because once you know The Void exists, you start looking at Elmore differently. You start wondering what else has been erased. Who else has been forgotten? How many people were thrown into that dimension before Molly? People that nobody remembers and nobody will ever look for. And the show keeps building on this. The Void does not just show up in one episode and disappear. It becomes a recurring part of the show's mythology. It is connected to bigger questions about what Elmore really is and who or what controls it. If the Void is the mechanism that removes mistakes, then someone or something must have created that mechanism. Someone or something decided what the rules are, what counts as a mistake, what deserves to stay, and what gets erased. And that leads to an even bigger question. Who is running Elmore? Who built this system? What is the true nature of this world that looks like a funny little cartoon town but operates like a machine with very specific programming? The Void also introduces a really important theme that the show will explore for the rest of its run. The idea of being unwanted. The idea of being considered a mistake. The idea that you can be erased from existence simply because someone decided you were not good enough. This is a theme that hits hard because on some level, everyone has felt that way. Everyone has felt like they do not fit in, like they are not interesting enough or special enough, like the world would not notice if they were gone. The Void takes that feeling and makes it literal. In Elmore, if you are not good enough, you actually do disappear, and that is terrifying. But the Void is not just a concept. It has real consequences for specific characters. And one character in particular has a story that is completely defined by the Void. A character who was thrown into that dimension, who fought his way back out, and who came back changed in ways that would shake Elmore to its core. But before we get to him, let us sit with what the Void tells us about Elmore for a moment longer, because the implications are massive. If Elmore has a self-correcting system, That means the town is not just a place where random things happen. It is a managed environment. It is a place where outcomes are controlled, where certain things are allowed and certain things are not. The chaos of Elmore, all the wild things that happen, all the crazy characters and impossible situations, that is all operating within boundaries that were set by something. The characters have the illusion of freedom, but they are actually living inside a system with rules they cannot see and cannot control. This connects directly to what we talked about in the first section, about how Elmore feels like more than just a setting. The Void is proof that it is more than a setting. It is proof that Elmore is a constructed reality, not a natural world where things just happen, but a designed world where things happen according to a plan. And the Void is the cleanup crew. It is the part of the system that handles the things that do not fit the plan. And think about what this means for the characters we love. The Wattersons, their friends, their classmates. All of them are living in a world that could erase them at any moment if it decided they were a mistake. They go about their daily lives, going to school, going to work, arguing, laughing, falling in love, not knowing that there is a force hovering over all of them with the power to make them disappear and make everyone forget they ever existed. Molly was boring. That was her crime. She was not interesting enough, and the world threw her away for it. So what does that mean for everyone else? How entertaining do you have to be to stay? How important do you have to be to avoid being erased? Is there a line, and if you fall below it, you are gone? These are not questions the show answers directly, but it puts them in your head, and once they are there, you cannot stop thinking about them. The Void also raises questions about memory and identity. If you are erased from everyone's memory, did you really exist? If nobody remembers you, if there is no evidence you were ever there, what does your existence even mean? The show touches on something genuinely philosophical here, without ever using big words or complicated ideas. It just shows you a girl floating in an empty dimension with nobody to remember her, and lets you feel the weight of that on your own. And the fact that Gumball and Darwin managed to remember Molly when everyone else forgot is important too. It suggests that there are cracks in the system. The Void is powerful, but it is not perfect. The erasure is not always complete. Some memories slip through. Some people notice the gaps. And those cracks, those imperfections in the system, become incredibly important as the show moves forward. Because if the system can fail, if people can notice that something is wrong, then maybe the system can be challenged. Maybe it can be fought. Maybe someone could look at the Void and the rules and the erasure and say, no, this is wrong, and I am going to do something about it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And that is exactly what happens, because there is one character in this show who experienced the Void more deeply than anyone else. Someone who was not just briefly pulled into it like Molly. Someone who lived it. Someone who was thrown away by the world, forgotten by everyone, erased from existence, and then somehow clawed his way back. And when he came back, he was not the same. He was broken, he was angry, and he had questions that demanded answers. His name is Rob, and his story is one of the most tragic and compelling villain origins in the history of animation. Section 7. Rob. From forgotten background character to tragic villain. At the end of the last section, we talked about the Void, that hidden dimension where Elmore sends the things it considers mistakes. We talked about how terrifying it is that the world can just erase someone and make everyone forget they existed. We talked about Molly, who was thrown into the Void simply for being boring. And we said that there is one character whose entire story is defined by the Void. A character who went through something far worse than Molly. A character who came back from erasure fundamentally broken and fundamentally changed. That character is Rob, and his story might be the saddest and most important story in the entire show. To understand Rob, you need to understand what he was before the Void. And that is the thing. He was nothing. Not nothing in the sense that he was a bad person or an evil person. Nothing in the sense that he barely existed as a character at all. Rob was a background character. If you watched the early seasons of Gumball and paid very close attention to the crowds at school or on the street, you might have spotted him. A Cyclops kid. One eye. Kind of generic looking. No real personality. No storylines, no friends, no purpose. He was just there, filling space in the background like a piece of furniture in a room that nobody pays attention to. And that is exactly what makes his story so devastating, because Rob did not do anything wrong. He was not mean. He was not evil. He was not even boring in the way Molly was boring. He was just unimportant. He did not have a role. He did not have a function in the world. He was a background character in the most literal sense, someone who existed only to make the world feel full without ever being noticed or acknowledged by anyone. And at some point, the world noticed that Rob did not matter. The system that runs Elmore, the same system that maintains the Void, looked at Rob and decided he was unnecessary, a mistake, wasted space. And it did what it always does with mistakes. It erased him. It threw him into the void. And just like with Molly, everyone forgot he ever existed. His classmates did not wonder where he went. His teachers did not mark him absent. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. Rob simply ceased to exist in the minds of everyone who had ever seen him. He was deleted from the world, like a file dragged to the recycle bin. But here is where Rob's story diverges from Molly's. Molly was in the void waiting to be rescued. She was stuck there, but she was intact. When Gumball and Darwin found her, she was still herself. Scared and alone, but herself. Rob was not that lucky. Rob was in the void for much longer, and the void did something to him. It broke him. Not just emotionally or mentally, though it certainly did that too. It broke him physically. When Rob eventually managed to escape the void, and the show does establish that he found his way out on his own, which is itself remarkable, he came back wrong. His body was glitched, corrupted, incomplete. Parts of him were missing or distorted. His appearance was fragmented, like a video that keeps buffering and skipping. He looked like a broken file, a corrupted piece of data that had been partially deleted and then improperly restored. He was not whole anymore. The void had taken pieces of him, and he could never get them back. And beyond the physical damage, there was the emotional and existential damage. Rob came back to a world that had thrown him away. A world that did not remember him. A world that had looked at him and decided he was not worth keeping. Imagine that for a second. Imagine being erased from existence, fighting your way back, and then realizing that nobody even noticed you were gone. Nobody missed you. Nobody looked for you. You went through the worst thing imaginable, and the world just kept spinning without you, like you never mattered at all. That would break anyone. And it broke Rob. When Rob first returns from the void, he tries to reintegrate. He tries to find his place. He tries to matter. And the show gives us this painful stretch where Rob is just trying to exist, trying to be someone, trying to find a role in a world that already decided it did not need him. And he fails, because the world was not built for him. He has no friends. He has no family that the show establishes. He has no storyline. He has no purpose. He is a background character who escaped the background, and now he has nowhere to go. And this is where Rob makes his choice. If the world will not give him a role, he will make one for himself. If nobody will pay attention to him as a regular person, maybe they will pay attention to him as something else. If the only way to matter in a world that threw you away is to become a threat to that world, then that is what he will do. Rob decides to become a villain. He takes on the identity of Dr. Wrecker. He starts causing problems. He starts targeting Gumball specifically, because Gumball is the main character. Gumball is the one the world revolves around. Gumball is everything Rob is not. Important, noticed, loved, central to every story. Gumball has everything that Rob was denied. And on some level, Rob both resents him for it and envies him for it. But here is what makes Rob different from almost every other cartoon villain. He knows what he is doing. He is completely self-aware about his decision to become the bad guy. He did not fall into villainy by accident. He chose it, deliberately. consciously, because he looked at the options available to him and decided that being the villain was the only role left. The hero spot was taken. The sidekick spot was taken. The funny friend, the love interest, the wise mentor, all taken. The only role that nobody was filling was the antagonist. And Rob figured that being the villain was better than being nothing. Being hated was better than being forgotten. That is an incredibly layered motivation for a cartoon antagonist. Rob is not evil because he is greedy or power-hungry or inherently cruel. He is evil because the world left him no other choice. Or at least, that is how he sees it. His villainy is born out of pain and rejection and the desperate need to matter. Every scheme he pulls, every plan he makes, every time he goes after Gumball, it is all driven by the same thing: the need to exist, the need to be seen, the need to have a purpose in a world that tried to erase him. And the show treats this with more empathy than you would expect. It does not just make Rob a punching bag for Gumball to defeat every week. It lets you feel his pain. It lets you understand why he is the way he is. There are moments where Rob is genuinely pitiful, not in a mocking way, but in a heartbreaking way. He is a lonely, broken person who is acting out because he does not know what else to do. He is a kid who got thrown away and is screaming, "Look at me, I am here, I matter," in the only way he knows how. Gumball's relationship with Rob is complicated too, because on some level, Gumball knows that Rob has a point. Gumball was there when they discovered the void. He knows the world erases people. He knows Rob was a victim of that system. And while Gumball fights Rob when he has to, there are moments where you can see that Gumball does not enjoy it. He does not take pleasure in beating the villain, because the villain is just a kid who got dealt the worst possible hand and is trying to survive. But Rob's story does not stay in this villain of the week mode. It evolves. And it evolves in a direction that nobody expected. Because as Rob spends more time being aware of how Elmore works, as he studies the patterns and the rules and the system that governs their world, he starts to figure things out that nobody else has figured out. He starts to see the bigger picture. He starts to understand that Elmore is not just a town with a void attached to it. There is something much larger going on, something that controls everything, something that determines what happens to every single person in Elmore. Rob begins to realize that their entire world might be constructed, that the characters in Elmore might not have free will in the way they think they do, that their lives, their stories, their very existence might be controlled by something outside of their reality. And this realization changes Rob completely, because suddenly his personal grudge against Gumball starts to seem small compared to the truth about what their world really is. This shift is crucial. Rob goes from being a character who is angry at the world for personal reasons to a character who understands something fundamental about the nature of reality itself. He goes from asking, "Why did this happen to me?" to asking, "Why does any of this happen to any of us?" And that evolution transforms him from a simple antagonist into one of the most important characters in the entire show's mythology. Rob's physical appearance continues to be a visual reminder of what was done to him. His glitched, broken body is not just a design choice, it is a scar. It is proof of what the void does to people. Every time you look at Rob, you see what Elmore is capable of doing to someone it considers a mistake. He walks around as living evidence that the world they all live in has a dark side, a mechanism for disposal that operates in silence and secrecy. And the tragedy of Rob is that he never gets to fully heal. He never gets his body back. He never gets his old life back. Not that he had much of one to begin with. He never gets the one thing he wanted most, which is to simply matter without having to fight for it. The world broke him, and it never offered to fix him. He had to build a new identity from the broken pieces, and the identity he built was a villain, because that was all that was left. But as we said, Rob eventually discovers something bigger than himself. He discovers the truth about what is really controlling Elmore, and that discovery leads him to make choices in the show's final episodes that redefine everything the audience thought they knew about him. Choices that turn him from a villain into something else entirely. Something that nobody, least of all Rob himself, ever expected him to be. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But to understand those choices, we first need to understand what Rob discovered. We need to talk about the thing that the show had been building toward from the very beginning. The meta-narrative. The idea that the characters in Gumball are slowly becoming aware that they are in a show. Because when a cartoon starts asking what happens when the characters realize they are not real, you are no longer watching a normal cartoon. You are watching something that is about to change the rules entirely. Section 8. The meta-narrative. The show becomes aware of itself. We just talked about Rob, how he was erased by the world, how he clawed his way back from the void, how he became a villain out of desperation, and how eventually he started discovering something much bigger than his own personal story. Something about the true nature of Elmore. Something about what is really controlling everything. And that brings us to what might be the most ambitious thing the Amazing World of Gumball ever did. The thing that separates it from almost every other cartoon ever made. The show did not just break the fourth wall for laughs. It made the fourth wall part of the actual story. It turned the idea of being a cartoon into real canonical lore. And it did it so gradually and so carefully that by the time you realize what is happening, you are already deep into one of the most mind-bending narratives in animation history. Let me explain what I mean. Lots of cartoons break the fourth wall. Characters look at the camera and make a joke. Someone says something like, "Well, that is the end of this episode." A character winks at the audience. These are quick gags. They are fun little moments that acknowledge the audience exists and then move on. The story does not change because of them. The world does not change because of them. They are just jokes. Gumball started that way too. In the early seasons, the fourth wall breaks were mostly just comedy. Characters would reference the fact that they are on a show, they would comment on the animation, they would make jokes about the format of the episode. It was funny and clever, but it seemed like nothing more than the show having a good time being self-aware. But as the seasons went on, something shifted. The fourth wall break stopped being just jokes and started becoming clues. The show began dropping hints that the characters were not just making funny comments about being in a cartoon. They were actually starting to realize it. They were becoming genuinely aware that their world was not real, that their lives were being controlled, that there was something outside of Elmore that was determining what happened to them. And this did not happen all at once. It happened slowly, across dozens of episodes, in small moments that you might not even notice the first time you watch them. A character would say something slightly too aware. The world would glitch in a way that felt deliberate rather than random. Someone would question why things always go back to normal, why damage repairs itself, why the same patterns keep repeating. These were not just throwaway lines, they were breadcrumbs. And the show was leaving a trail that led somewhere very specific. One of the earliest and most important signs of this was the visual glitches. Throughout the series, especially in later seasons, Elmore would sometimes glitch. The screen would flicker, static would appear, characters would freeze or skip like a video with a bad connection. And these glitches were not treated as normal. Characters noticed them. Characters reacted to them. The glitches were not just animation gags. They were something happening within the world of the show, something the characters could see and feel and be disturbed by. Think about what that means. If you are a character living in Elmore and you see the world around you glitch like a broken screen, what does that tell you? It tells you that your world is not solid. It is not natural. It is running on some kind of system that can malfunction. It is like living inside a computer program and occasionally seeing the code break through the surface. It is deeply unsettling, and characters in the show react to it that way. They are confused, they are scared, they do not understand what they are seeing, but they know it is wrong. And then there are the moments where characters directly question the nature of their reality. Why do things reset after every episode? Why can they survive injuries that should be fatal? Why does the world seem to follow certain patterns and rules that do not make logical sense? These questions pop up more and more frequently as the show goes on, and the show never fully answers them in a neat, tidy way. Instead, it lets the questions hang in the air, building a sense of unease that grows with every season. The show also plays with the idea that there might be someone watching, not in a paranoid, scary way at first, more in a subtle, creeping way. Characters occasionally glance at the camera in moments that feel less like a comedy wink and more like genuine awareness, like they can feel eyes on them, like they sense that their lives are being observed by something they cannot see or understand. It is the difference between a character looking at the camera and saying something funny and a character looking at the camera with genuine confusion, like they are wondering who is on the other side. And this is where the show's unique visual style becomes part of the storytelling. Remember, Gumball is a show that mixes different types of animation. You have 2D characters, 3D characters, puppets, live-action backgrounds, paper cutouts, all existing in the same world. In most episodes, this is just the show's signature look. But as the meta-narrative develops, you start to wonder if the mix of styles is itself a clue. Why do the characters all look so different from each other? Why do some look like they belong in different shows entirely? Is it possible that they are from different shows? Is it possible that Elmore is some kind of collection point where characters from different formats and different styles were all brought together and placed in one world? The show never confirms this directly, but it plants the idea in your head. And once it is there, you cannot stop seeing evidence for it everywhere. The characters look different because they are different. They were made differently. They come from different places, and they were all put into Elmore by whatever force created this world. Then there is the Chanax connection. Throughout the show, you can spot references to Chanax Incorporated, which within the world of the show appears to be some kind of corporation or entity connected to Elmore's existence. The name Chanax appears on products, on buildings, in the background of scenes. It is never fully explained within the show itself, but its repeated presence suggests that there is an organizational force behind Elmore, something institutional, something that built or manages or owns the world these characters live in. In the real world, Chanax is a reference to the production companies behind the show, but within the fiction of Gumball, it takes on a much more mysterious and unsettling meaning. It suggests that Elmore was manufactured, that it is a product, that the characters are living inside something that was made for a purpose they do not fully understand. All of these elements, the glitches, the self-awareness, the visual style, the Chanax references, the questions about reality, they all build toward a single idea that the show spends its entire run developing. The idea that Elmore is not a real place. It is a show, a produced reality, a created world that exists for the entertainment of an audience the characters cannot see. And the characters are slowly, painfully, terrifyingly beginning to figure that out. This is what makes Gumball's meta-narrative different from any other cartoon that breaks the fourth wall. It is not playing it for laughs. I mean, it is, because the show is still funny. It never stops being funny. But underneath the humor, there is a genuine existential crisis building. What happens when a cartoon character realizes they are in a cartoon? What happens when they understand that their free will might be an illusion? That their lives might be scripted? That the world they love and the people they care about might not be real in the way they thought? These are heavy questions, and the show raises them without ever becoming preachy or pretentious. It weaves them into the fabric of the comedy so naturally that you can watch the show and just enjoy the funny moments without ever engaging with the deeper stuff. But if you do engage with it, if you start pulling at those threads, you find a show that is asking some of the most profound questions any piece of entertainment has ever asked. And it is doing it through a blue cat and an orange fish who go to middle school. Rob is the character who pulls hardest at these threads. As we discussed in the last section, Rob's journey from forgotten background character to self-aware villain naturally led him to question the nature of Elmore more deeply than anyone else. He had already experienced the worst the system could do. He had been erased, He had seen the void. He had seen the glitches from the inside. And all of that gave him a perspective that no other character had. He was not just questioning reality out of curiosity. He was questioning it because reality had personally victimized him, and he wanted to know why. And what Rob eventually discovers, or at least what he comes to believe, is that Elmore is going to end. Not in the sense that the town will be destroyed by a villain or a natural disaster, in the sense that the show is going to be canceled. The produced reality that they all live in is going to stop being produced. And when that happens, everything ends. Every character, every relationship, every memory, everything. It all goes away. Not into the void, which is at least somewhere, into nothing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That realization transforms Rob one final time, and it sets the stage for the show's final episodes in a way that nobody could have predicted. But we are not there yet. Before we get to the ending, before we talk about Rob's final desperate act and the cliffhanger that shook the entire fanbase, we need to take a step back and appreciate the other thing that makes this show so special. Because for all its deep lore and meta storytelling, Gumball would be nothing without the incredible supporting cast that fills every corner of Elmore with life and personality and heart. And those characters deserve their moment in the spotlight before we bring this story to its conclusion. Section 9. Elmore's supporting cast. Why every side character matters. We have spent a lot of time talking about the big picture stuff. The void, the meta-narrative, the existential questions about what Elmore really is. And all of that is important. It is what gives the show its depth and its legacy. But here's the thing. None of that deep lore would matter if the world did not feel alive. If the town of Elmore felt empty or flat, or like it was just a backdrop for the Wattersons to bounce off of, nobody would care about the bigger mysteries. The reason the audience cares about what happens to Elmore is because the show made them care about the people living in it. And by people, I mean every single weird, wonderful, absurd character that fills the hallways of Elmore Junior High and the streets of this insane town. Because the supporting cast of Gumball is not just good, it is one of the best ensemble casts in the history of animated television. And the show does something really smart with them. It gives almost every side character, no matter how minor they seem at first, at least one moment of genuine depth. One episode or one scene where you realize that the funny background character you have been laughing at for 3 seasons is actually a fully realized person with feelings and problems and a story of their own. And that makes the world feel real in a way that very few cartoons achieve. Let us start at school, because that is where most of these characters live. Penny Fitzgerald is one of the most important supporting characters in the entire show, and we will talk more about her relationship with Gumball in the next section. But in terms of who she is as a character on her own, Penny is fascinating. For the first few seasons of the show, Penny appears to be a peanut. She has antlers and a shell, and she looks like a member of a normal peanut family in Elmore. But the show drops hints early on that there is something underneath that shell, that Penny is hiding something. And in the episode called The Shell, everything changes. Penny's shell cracks open, and what comes out is not a peanut at all. Penny is a shape-shifting fairy-like creature. She can change her form based on her emotions. She is beautiful and strange and completely different from what everyone thought she was. Her family had kept her in that shell her whole life, forcing her to hide her true self because her real form was considered too different, too unpredictable, too much. The Shell is one of the most celebrated episodes in the entire series because it takes a supporting character and gives her a moment of genuine transformation that works both as a literal plot point and as a powerful statement about being yourself. Then there is Banana Joe. On the surface, Banana Joe is just the class clown. He is a banana, he tells bad jokes, he does silly things. He is the kid in school who is always trying to make people laugh. And for a lot of the show, that is all he seems to be. But the show reveals that Banana Joe's home life is not great. His parents have a troubled relationship. There is tension and unhappiness behind the goofy exterior. And suddenly the class clown thing makes sense in a different way. He is not just funny because he is a banana. He is funny because being funny is how he copes. It is how he deals with the fact that things at home are not okay. The show does not hit you over the head with this. It just shows you in small moments and lets you put the pieces together. Tobias Wilson is the jock of the group. He is a rainbow-colored character who thinks he is the coolest person in school. He talks big, he tries to act tough, he hits on every girl he sees, he positions himself as this alpha personality. But the show consistently reveals that Tobias is deeply insecure. He is not actually cool. He is not actually tough. He is a kid who is desperately trying to project an image of himself that does not match reality. His confidence is a mask, and underneath it is someone who is terrified of not being liked, not being popular, not being the person he pretends to be. The show uses Tobias to poke fun at the try-hard personality type, but it also lets you feel sorry for him in moments where the mask slips. Carrie Kruger is a ghost. Literally a ghost. She floats around, she can phase through walls, and she has a gloomy, dark personality that leans into gothic and emo territory. Carrie is interesting because the show gives her a genuine backstory and genuine emotions beneath the spooky exterior. She develops a relationship with Darwin over the course of the series, and those episodes show a softer side to her character. She is not just the creepy goth girl. She is someone who has experienced loss and loneliness, being a ghost and all, and who finds unexpected connection with the most unlikely person. Bobert is a robot. He is one of the students at Elmore Junior High, and his character raises all sorts of interesting questions about what it means to be alive in a world where anything can be a person. Bobert wants to understand emotions. He wants to fit in. He wants to be a real part of the group, even though he is fundamentally different from everyone else. There are episodes where Bobert tries to mimic human behavior and gets it hilariously wrong, but there are also moments where his desire to be accepted feels genuinely moving. He is a machine trying to understand what it means to be alive, and in a town like Elmore, where that question applies to literally everyone, his struggle resonates. Then there is Alan, the balloon. Alan is presented as this impossibly nice, impossibly positive, impossibly perfect character. He is kind to everyone. He never says a mean word. He is always smiling. And the show uses him in a really clever way. Because at first, Alan seems like a genuinely good person. But the more you see of him, the more the show suggests that there might be something off about his relentless positivity. Is anyone really that nice? Is it possible that Alan's goodness is itself a kind of performance? The show plays with this idea without ever fully resolving it, which makes Alan one of the most quietly unsettling characters in the cast. Miss Simeon is the teacher at Elmore Junior High, and she is one of the most memorable adult characters in the show. She is an ape, and the show establishes that she has been alive and teaching for an absurdly long time. We are talking hundreds of thousands of years. She is ancient, and she is bitter. She hates her job, she hates her students, she especially hates Gumball, who she sees as the embodiment of everything that annoys her about teaching. But the show also gives Miss Simeon moments of surprising vulnerability. She is in a relationship with Principal Brown, and those scenes show that beneath all the cruelty and the bitterness, there is a person who wants to be loved and who has her own insecurities. She is not just the mean teacher. She is a very old, very tired person who has been doing the same thing for longer than anyone should have to. Principal Brown is the head of Elmore Junior High. He is a fuzzy slug-like creature who is not particularly good at his job. He is more interested in his relationship with Miss Simeon than he is in running the school. He is easily flustered, easily manipulated, and generally incompetent. But he is also harmless and oddly endearing. He is the kind of authority figure who you cannot take seriously, but also cannot really hate. And then there is Larry Needlemeyer. We mentioned Larry back in the first section, but he deserves more attention here because Larry might be the most important supporting character in terms of what he represents. Larry is a rock, and he works every single job in Elmore. The gas station, the pizza place, the grocery store, the video rental store, the convenience store, the mall. Everywhere you go in Elmore, Larry is there, working behind the counter. He is the economic backbone of the entire town. And the show proved this definitively when Larry quit all his jobs in frustration and Elmore immediately collapsed. Everything fell apart. Services stopped. Society crumbled because Larry was literally holding the entire infrastructure of the town together by himself. Larry is a commentary on the people who keep the world running. The workers who are everywhere, doing everything and getting very little thanks or recognition for it. He is overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated. He is tired. He is stressed. He is one bad day away from quitting again and watching it all burn. But he keeps going. Because someone has to. And in Elmore, that someone is always Larry. Mr. Small is the school guidance counselor. He is a small, fluffy creature who is deeply into spirituality, nature, and alternative living. He meditates, he talks about energy and vibrations, and being one with the universe. And normally this would just be a funny character trait played for laughs. But Mr. Small is also the character who was with Gumball and Darwin when they discovered the void. He has seen behind the curtain of Elmore's reality. And throughout the show, Mr. Small has moments where his hippie philosophy gives way to genuine existential dread. He knows more about the true nature of the world than most people, and sometimes that knowledge weighs on him. There are dozens more characters I could talk about. Tina Rex, the actual dinosaur who is the school bully. Susie, the unpredictable chin puppet character who defies all logic. Idaho, the potato who comes from a farm and struggles with the fast-paced world of Elmore. Masami, the rich cloud girl who uses her family's wealth to get what she wants. Each one of them adds something to the world. Each one of them makes Elmore feel like a place where every corner has a story waiting to be told. And that is what separates Gumball from so many other cartoons. It is not just a show about one family. It is a show about an entire town, an entire community of wildly different characters who all have their own lives, their own problems, their own depth. And when the show starts raising the stakes in its final seasons, when the meta-narrative kicks in and the future of Elmore is threatened, the audience is not just worried about the Wattersons. They are worried about everyone. They are worried about Larry and Carrie and Bobert and Banana Joe and all the others because the show made you care about all of them. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But of all the relationships in this supporting cast, there is one that we have only touched on briefly, and it deserves a much deeper look. Because the love story between Gumball and Penny is not just a cute cartoon romance. It is one of the most well-developed and emotionally honest relationships in the show. And the moment Penny broke out of her shell changed everything for both of them. Section 10, the romantic arcs, Gumball and Penny, and beyond. At the end of the last section, we said that of all the relationships among Elmore's incredible supporting cast, one stands out above the rest. The relationship between Gumball and Penny Fitzgerald. And we said that the moment Penny broke out of her shell changed everything. So now let us talk about that. Because this is not just a simple cartoon crush, where the main character likes a girl and they hold hands and that is the end of it. The relationship between Gumball and Penny is one of the most carefully developed romances in animated television. It takes its time, it goes through real stages, and it uses one of the most powerful visual moments in the entire show to say something genuinely beautiful about love, vulnerability, and accepting people for who they really are. Let us go back to the beginning. From the very first season, the show establishes that Gumball has a crush on Penny, and it is not subtle. Gumball is head over heels for this girl. He gets nervous around her. He does stupid things trying to impress her. He stumbles over his words. He makes elaborate plans to get her attention that almost always blow up in his face. It is classic cartoon crush behavior, and the show plays it for comedy in the early going. Gumball likes Penny. Penny seems to like Gumball back, but is too shy to say it directly. And they dance around each other for episode after episode, getting close, but never quite getting there. But while all of this cute back and forth is happening, the show is quietly building something much deeper. Because Penny has a secret. And it is not a small one. For the first couple of seasons, Penny appears to be a peanut. She looks like a peanut with antlers, part of a family of peanuts. Her dad Patrick is a peanut, her mom Judith is a peanut, her little sister Polly is a peanut. They are a peanut family. And Penny walks around in her peanut shell every day, going to school, talking to friends, living her life. And nobody questions it, because in Elmore, a peanut person is not even close to the weirdest thing walking around. But the show drops hints, small ones at first, hints that there is something underneath Penny's shell, that the shell is not actually who she is, that it is more like a costume, a covering, something she wears to hide what is really underneath. And those hints build and build until they reach a breaking point in one of the most important episodes of the entire series, The Shell. The Shell is the episode where everything changes. In this episode, Penny's shell cracks, and what comes out is not what anyone expected. Penny is not a peanut at all. Underneath the shell, she is a shape-shifting creature, some kind of fairy-like being made of light and energy that can change her form based on her emotions. When she is happy, she looks one way. When she is scared, she transforms into something else. When she is angry, she changes again. Her true self is fluid and unpredictable, and completely different from the solid, stable peanut shell she had been hiding inside her whole life. And Penny is terrified. She has spent her entire life inside that shell. Her family kept her in it. They made her believe that her true form was something to be ashamed of, something that needed to be hidden, something that was too strange, too different, too much for the world to accept. Her father, Patrick in particular, was very firm about keeping the shell on. He saw it as protection. He believed that the world would not accept Penny for what she really was, so the safest thing was to keep her covered up and looking normal. When the shell cracks and Penny's true form is revealed, she panics. She does not see herself as beautiful or free. She sees herself as exposed, as vulnerable, as a freak. Everything her family told her about needing the shell comes rushing back, and she is overwhelmed with fear and shame. She runs. She literally runs away from Gumball, from her friends, from everyone, because she cannot handle being seen for who she really is. And this is where Gumball does something that defines his character more than any other moment in the entire series. He goes after her. He does not hesitate. He does not flinch. He does not look at Penny's true form and decide it is too weird or too different or too much. He sees her, all of her, the shape-shifting, the instability, the rawness of who she really is underneath, and he accepts her completely. He tells her she is beautiful, not the shell, not the version of herself that her family approved of. Her, the real her, the messy, changing, unpredictable, vulnerable her. And in that moment, the show does something incredible. It takes a cartoon romance and turns it into one of the most powerful statements about love and acceptance that any show, animated or otherwise, has ever made. Because what Gumball is really saying is that love is not about the version of someone that is safe and easy to deal with. Love is about seeing someone at their most exposed, their most afraid, their most real, and choosing to stay. Choosing to say, you are enough exactly as you are. I do not need you to hide. I do not need you to be something you are not. I just need you to be you. That is not a lesson you expect to get from a cartoon about a blue cat, but there it is, and it hits hard. After the shell, Gumball and Penny become an actual couple, and the show handles their relationship with surprising maturity from that point on. They do not just become the perfect, happy couple who never has problems. They have awkward moments, they have misunderstandings, they have fights, they have episodes where one of them messes up and has to figure out how to make it right. Their relationship feels like a real relationship between two young people who are still figuring out what it means to be with someone. Gumball is still Gumball. He is still dramatic and impulsive and self-centered sometimes. He still does dumb things. And Penny has to deal with that. She has to decide over and over again whether Gumball's flaws are worth putting up with. And Gumball has to learn that being in a relationship is not just about the big romantic gestures. It is about showing up consistently, being reliable, listening, caring about what the other person needs even when it is not exciting or fun. Penny, for her part, grows a lot after coming out of her shell. She is no longer the shy girl in the background waiting for Gumball to notice her. She becomes more confident, more assertive, more willing to speak her mind. She has her own opinions and her own boundaries, and she is not afraid to push back when Gumball crosses them. The relationship becomes a partnership between two people who are both growing up and figuring things out at the same time. But the romance in Gumball is not limited to just Gumball and Penny. The show gives us several other love stories that add richness to the world, and the most important of these is the love story we already touched on in earlier sections, Nicole and Richard. We talked about how they met. We talked about how Nicole chose Richard over every supposedly better option because he was the only person who made her happy. But what the show does so well with their relationship is show what that choice looks like years down the line. Not the fairy tale version, the real version. The version where Nicole is exhausted and frustrated, and Richard has not done anything useful all day, and the house is a mess, and the kids are causing chaos, and nothing is going the way it should. Nicole and Richard's relationship is not glamorous. It is not the kind of romance you see in movies. It is the kind of romance where one person carries most of the weight, and the other person does not even realize how heavy that weight is. It is the kind of romance where love is not about grand gestures, but about choosing to stay even when staying is hard. Nicole could leave. She could find someone who matches her drive and her ambition and her capability. The show literally showed us in the choices that those paths existed. But she stays with Richard. Every day, she chooses him again. Not because he is perfect, not because he makes her life easier, but because he makes her life full. And Richard, in his own limited way, shows his love constantly. He may not be able to hold down a job or clean the house or make smart decisions, but he is present. He is joyful. He makes Nicole laugh when she has forgotten how. He plays with his kids with a wholehearted enthusiasm that a more responsible father might not have. He looks at Nicole like she is the most amazing person in the world, because to him, she is. His love is simple and unconditional and consistent. And for someone like Nicole, who grew up without any of those things, that simplicity is a gift. The show also gives us the relationship between Miss Simeon and Principal Brown, which is played mostly for comedy, but has its genuine moments. These are two adults who found each other in the weird little world of Elmore Junior High and somehow made it work. Miss Simeon is ancient and bitter and mean. Principal Brown is bumbling and incompetent, but they care about each other. They are a couple that nobody would put together on paper, but in practice, they make sense. They accept each other's flaws because at a certain point in life, finding someone who wants to be with you, flaws and all, is more valuable than finding someone who looks perfect. And there is the developing connection between Darwin and Carrie that the show builds over time. Darwin, the sweetest and most optimistic character in the show, and Carrie, the gloomy ghost girl who has seen the darker side of existence. They are opposites in almost every way, but the show brings them together gradually, letting their connection grow naturally through shared moments and quiet understanding. Darwin's warmth reaches through Carrie's gloom, and Carrie's depth gives Darwin someone who challenges him to see the world differently. It is a sweet, understated romance that the show handles with a light touch. What all of these relationships have in common is the same core idea. Love in Gumball is not about finding someone who is perfect. It is about finding someone who is right for you, even if they are wrong in every other way. It is about seeing people clearly, seeing their flaws and their weirdness and their broken parts, and choosing them anyway. Penny is a shape-shifting being who cannot control her own form. Richard is a man who cannot function as a responsible adult. Carrie is literally dead. None of these people are easy to love, but they are loved, deeply and fully and without conditions. And that is the show's quiet message about romance. It is not about the shell. It is about what is underneath. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But as beautiful as these love stories are, as warm and funny and real as the relationships in this show feel, there is a storm coming. Because everything we have talked about so far, the family, the friendships, the romances, the world itself, all of it is about to be threatened. The meta-narrative we discussed earlier is about to reach its peak. And in the final episodes of the series, the show asks the biggest question it has ever asked. What happens when the story ends? What happens to the characters when the show is over? And one unlikely character is going to try to save everyone from an enemy they cannot fight. The end of the show itself. Section 11, the finale arc, the Inquisition, and the end of everything. Everything we have talked about so far has been building to this. Every piece of lore, every character backstory, every mysterious glitch, and every unsettling question about the nature of Elmore. It has all been leading here, to the final episodes of The Amazing World of Gumball, to the moment where the show stops hinting at the truth and finally confronts it head-on. And what happens in these final episodes is one of the boldest, most shocking, and most heartbreaking things any cartoon has ever done. To understand the finale, you need to remember everything we have established. Elmore is not just a town. It is a constructed reality, a world that operates on rules that were set by something outside of it. The void exists to erase things the world considers mistakes. The characters have been slowly becoming aware that their reality is not what it seems. Glitches have been appearing. The fourth wall has been cracking. And Rob, the forgotten background character who clawed his way out of the void, has been digging deeper into the truth than anyone else. All of those threads come together in the final stretch of Season 6. And the episode that brings it all to a head is called The Inquisition. The Inquisition starts in a way that immediately feels different from a normal episode. Something is wrong at Elmore Junior High. A new superintendent has arrived and he is making changes. Big changes. Strange changes. He calls himself Superintendent Evil, and he is imposing new rules on the school that do not make any sense. He wants to fundamentally change how the students look and behave. Specifically, he wants to transform them. He wants to turn the cartoon characters of Elmore into realistic-looking versions of themselves, not 2D animated characters, not the colorful, expressive, stylized designs we have known for 6 seasons. He wants to make them look real, three-dimensional, live action, like actual people and objects in the real world. At first, this seems like just another villain scheme, another bad guy showing up with a weird plan that Gumball and Darwin need to stop. The students resist. They do not want to be changed. They do not want to lose who they are. They like being cartoon characters. They like looking the way they look. And so they fight back against Superintendent Evil and his plan to transform them all. But then comes the twist. And it is a twist that changes everything. Superintendent Evil is not who he appears to be. He is Rob. Rob in disguise. The same Rob who was erased by the void. The same Rob who came back broken and glitched. The same Rob who became a villain because the world left him no other choice. Rob has been hiding behind this superintendent disguise, and when his identity is revealed, the natural reaction from Gumball and everyone else is to treat him as the bad guy. Of course Rob is behind this. He is the villain. This is what he does. But Rob is not doing what they think he is doing. He is not trying to hurt them. He is not trying to control them or take over the school or destroy Elmore. Rob is trying to save them. All of them. Every single character in Elmore. And the thing he is trying to save them from is something none of them can fight. Something none of them can punch or outsmart or run away from. The show is ending. Rob has figured it out. He has put together all the pieces, the glitches, the void, the meta clues, the sense that their world is produced, that their reality is a show being watched by an audience they cannot see. Rob has realized that Elmore exists as a television show, and that television show is being canceled. It is ending. And when it ends, everything ends with it. Every character, every relationship, every memory, everything they have ever been, and everything they could ever be, all of it will simply stop. Not die, not go to the void, just stop existing entirely, like a TV being switched off. And Rob, the character everyone thought was the villain, the character who was thrown away and forgotten and broken, is the only one who figured this out. He is the only one who saw the truth. And instead of running or hiding or giving up, he came up with a plan. If the show is ending because it is an animated cartoon that has been canceled, then maybe the characters can survive by becoming something else. If they stop being cartoon characters and become realistic, live-action versions of themselves, maybe they can exist in a different format. Maybe they can escape the cancellation by transforming into something that is not the show that is being canceled. That is why Rob was trying to transform everyone. Not to hurt them, to save them. The entire plan that looked like a villain scheme was actually a desperate rescue mission by the one person who understood what was really happening. Rob was not the antagonist of the finale. He was the hero. Or at least he was trying to be. And this revelation reframes Rob's entire story. Every villain thing he did, every scheme, every attack, all of it was the journey of someone who was trying to find his purpose. And in the end, his purpose was not to destroy, it was to protect. The character who had been treated as a mistake by the world, who had been erased and forgotten and left broken, turns out to be the one person willing to sacrifice everything to save that same world. The world that threw him away. The world that did not think he mattered. He is trying to save it anyway. Because Rob figured out that being a hero is not about whether the world thinks you deserve to be one. It is about doing the right thing when it matters most, regardless of what the world has done to you. But here is the devastating part. The plan does not fully work. Gumball and the others resist the transformation because they do not understand what Rob is trying to do. They fight him because from their perspective, he is the bad guy changing them against their will. And by the time the truth starts to come out, by the time the pieces start falling into place, it is too late. The episode builds to its final moments, and what happens next is one of the most talked about endings in cartoon history. The screen starts to glitch. Not a small glitch, not a subtle flicker, a full, massive, reality-breaking glitch that consumes everything. Static fills the screen. The world of Elmore begins to break apart. Characters freeze, colors distort. Everything the show has spent 6 seasons building starts to collapse in real time. The carefully constructed world, the characters we have grown to love, the relationships, and the humor, and the heart, all of it is being torn apart by something the characters cannot stop. And then the screen goes black. That is it. That is how the Amazing World of Gumball ends, on a cliffhanger, on a black screen, on the most devastating and ambitious note any cartoon has ever ended on. There is no resolution. There is no happy ending. There is no moment where the heroes save the day and everything goes back to normal. The show just stops. The world glitches out and the screen goes dark, and the audience is left sitting there in stunned silence, wondering what just happened. The show ended its own existence as a plot point within the show. The cancellation of the series became the final villain. Not a person, not a monster, not a supernatural force. The end of the story itself was the threat. And the characters could not beat it. They could not outsmart it or fight it or run from it, because how do you fight the end of your own existence? How do you defeat the fact that the people who created you have decided to stop telling your story? Now, let me be clear about something. This was not an accident. This was not the show getting canceled unexpectedly and the writers scrambling to put something together. This was planned. This was deliberate. The creators of Gumball knew the show was ending, and they chose to make the ending of the show part of the story. They turned their own cancellation into the final piece of lore. They made the meta-narrative literal. The show had spent years having its characters slowly realize they were in a cartoon, and the final episode is what happens when that realization fully arrives. The cartoon is ending, and the characters know it, and they cannot stop it. It is devastating, it is brilliant, and it made the fan base lose their minds. Because here is the thing about a cliffhanger like that. It does not give you closure. It gives you questions. What happened to Gumball and Darwin? What happened to Nicole and Richard and Aeneas? What happened to Penny and Carrie and Banana Joe and Larry and everyone else? Did Rob's plan work at all? Did any of them survive? Is Elmore gone forever? The show gave us nothing, just darkness and silence, and the knowledge that the world we spent 6 seasons falling in love with might be gone. And fans did not take that quietly. The cliffhanger sparked massive discussion and debate across the internet. People analyzed every frame of the finale looking for clues. They rewatched the entire series looking for hints about what the ending meant. They wrote theories and made videos and argued about whether the characters survived or not. The ending of Gumball did not just finish a show. It started a conversation that has not stopped since. Some people were angry. They felt cheated out of a proper ending. They wanted to see the story resolved, the characters saved, the world restored. And that frustration is completely understandable. After 6 seasons of investment, after falling in love with these characters and their world, being handed a black screen and a cliffhanger feels cruel. But other people saw the genius in it. They understood that the cliffhanger was the point, that ending without resolution was the most honest thing the show could have done. Because the show was about characters living inside a produced reality. And when that produced reality ends, there is no neat conclusion. There is no final bow. The screen just goes dark. That is what cancellation looks like from the inside. And by making the audience feel that loss, that confusion, that desperate need for more, the show made its final point more powerfully than any traditional ending could have. It made you feel what the characters feel. It made you understand what it means for a world to just stop. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And here's the thing. The story is not over. Not really, because the cliffhanger was not meant to be the final word. It was meant to be a bridge to something bigger, something that would pick up where the show left off and finally give the characters and the audience the resolution they deserve. And that something has been confirmed. It is coming. And it carries the weight of every unanswered question, every unresolved storyline, and every ounce of love that the fan base has held on to since that screen went black. We need to talk about the movie. Section 12. The Gumball Movie. The Unresolved Future. We just talked about how the Amazing World of Gumball ended. That black screen, that devastating cliffhanger, the world of Elmore glitching out and collapsing into static and silence. And we talked about how that ending left millions of fans around the world sitting in stunned disbelief, wondering if the characters they had spent 6 seasons falling in love with were gone forever. It was bold, it was brilliant, and it was absolutely agonizing, because for a long time after that finale aired, there was no answer. No confirmation of what came next, just silence. And in that silence, the fan base held on. They held on tighter than almost any fan base in animation history. And eventually, their patience was rewarded. Because the story of Elmore is not over. There is a movie coming. And that movie carries the weight of everything the show built across 6 incredible seasons. Let us start with what we know for certain. The Gumball movie has been officially confirmed. This is not a rumor, this is not fan speculation, this is not a maybe or a hopefully or a wouldn't it be nice if. The movie is real, it is in development, and it has been acknowledged publicly by the people involved with the show. After years of fans asking and hoping and campaigning for some kind of continuation, the confirmation that a movie was happening was one of the biggest moments in the Gumball community's history. Now, the road to getting that confirmation was not short or easy. After the finale aired, there was a long period of uncertainty. Fans did not know if the cliffhanger was truly the end or if something more was planned. The show's creator, Ben Bacalé, had always been open about the fact that the cliffhanger was designed to lead into something bigger. It was not meant to be the final word on the story. It was meant to be a setup, a launching point for a continuation that would resolve the massive questions the finale left hanging. But knowing that a continuation was intended and knowing that it would actually happen are two very different things. Animation takes time, deals take time, production takes time, and fans had to wait. And wait they did. The Gumball fan base is one of the most dedicated and passionate communities in all of animation. During the years between the finale and the movie confirmation, they kept the show alive in every way they could. They made fan art, they wrote theories, they created videos analyzing every detail of the show's lore. They rewatched episodes and found new connections and new clues that they had missed the first time around. They held on to Elmore with both hands and refused to let it fade into obscurity. And honestly, the cliffhanger ending is a big part of why the community stayed so active. If the show had ended with a neat, tidy conclusion where everything was resolved and everyone was happy, fans would have been satisfied. They would have smiled and moved on to the next thing. But the cliffhanger did not let them move on. It left a wound that was still open, a question that was still unanswered, and that open wound kept people engaged in a way that a clean ending never could have. People do not obsess over stories that are finished. They obsess over stories that are unfinished. And Gumball gave them the most unfinished ending imaginable. So what do we know about the movie itself? The honest answer is that specific plot details have been kept under wraps. The production has not released a full synopsis or a detailed breakdown of the storyline. But based on what has been said publicly and what the show itself set up, we can talk about what the movie is expected to address. The most obvious thing the movie needs to deal with is the cliffhanger. The world of Elmore was breaking apart. Reality was glitching. The characters were in danger of ceasing to exist. Rob had tried to save everyone by transforming them into a different format, and that plan was interrupted before it could be completed. So the movie needs to pick up from that moment of crisis and show us what happens next. Do the characters survive? Is Elmore restored? Can the world be saved? These are the questions that have been hanging over the fan base since the finale, and the movie is the only thing that can answer them. But the movie is not just about resolving a cliffhanger. It is about resolving the entire thematic arc of the show. Because remember, the core idea that the finale was built on is the concept that the characters exist inside a produced reality, and that reality is ending. The show turned its own cancellation into a story point. It made the end of the show the final villain, and that means the movie has to engage with that idea on a deeper level. It cannot just wave a magic wand and say, everything is fine now. It has to address what it means for these characters to fight for their own existence, to confront the fact that their world might not be real in the way they thought, to face the possibility that everything they are could be taken away by forces completely outside their control. That is a massive story to tell, and it is one of the reasons a movie is the right format for it. A regular 11-minute episode of Gumball could never do justice to the scale of what needs to be resolved. The movie gives the creators the time and the space to tell this story properly, to give the characters room to breathe, to build toward a conclusion that feels earned and satisfying after everything the audience has been through. And think about what this movie means for the characters specifically. For Gumball, the kid who spent 6 seasons trying to figure out who he is and where he fits in the world, the movie is the ultimate test. Because now, the world itself might not be there anymore. Everything he loves, his family, his friends, his town, all of it is threatened. And Gumball has to step up in a way he never has before. He cannot scheme his way out of this. He cannot stumble into a lucky solution. This is the biggest challenge any version of Gumball has ever faced, and it is going to require him to be more than the loudmouth blue cat who causes problems. It is going to require him to be a hero. For Darwin, the movie is about loyalty in the face of the impossible. Darwin has always been the one who stands by Gumball, no matter what. But standing by someone when the entire world is ending is a different kind of test. Darwin's goodness, his kindness, his unshakable belief that things can work out if you try hard enough, all of that is going to be pushed to its absolute limit. For Nicole, the woman who has spent her entire life holding things together through sheer force of will, the movie represents the one thing she cannot punch her way through. Nicole can fight any enemy. She can survive any physical challenge. But how do you fight the end of reality? How do you protect your family from something that is bigger than anything you have ever faced? Nicole's strength has always been her defining trait, and the movie is going to test whether that strength extends beyond the physical. For Richard, the man whose laziness is woven into the fabric of reality, the movie raises a terrifying question. If reality is ending, what happens to the rules that kept it together? What happens to the cosmic law that says Richard has to be lazy for the world to function? If the world is breaking apart, does that rule still apply? And if it does not, who is Richard without it? And for Rob, the movie represents the culmination of the most complex character arc in the entire show. Rob went from nobody to villain to tragic figure to unlikely hero. His plan to save everyone was the driving force of the finale. And the movie needs to show us whether that plan, or some version of it, can actually work. Rob has been fighting for his right to exist since the moment he crawled out of the void. The movie is his chance to finally prove that he matters, that he was never a mistake, that the world was wrong to throw him away. The movie also matters for the legacy of the show as a whole, because right now, The Amazing World of Gumball exists in a strange space. It is a show that is universally loved and respected. It pushed the boundaries of what a cartoon could be. It mixed animation styles in ways nobody had done before. It told stories that were funny and deep and heartbreaking and philosophical all at the same time. It created one of the richest worlds in animation history and filled it with characters that people genuinely care about. But it is also a show that ended without an ending. And that incomplete status hangs over everything. The movie has the chance to change that, to give the show the conclusion it deserves, to tie together every thread, every theme, every character arc, and every piece of lore into something that feels complete. If the movie gets it right, it does not just resolve a cliffhanger, it elevates the entire series. It turns 6 seasons of setup and build-up into a complete story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It makes rewatching the show a richer experience because now you know where it is all heading. Now you can see the breadcrumbs for what they really were. Now the glitches and the void and the meta moments and the fourth wall breaks all lead somewhere specific. And if there is any show that has earned the right to a spectacular movie conclusion, it is this one. Because Gumball never took the easy route. From its very first episode, it was a show that was willing to be weird, willing to be different, willing to take risks that other cartoons would never dream of. It put a blue cat and an orange fish in a world where anything could be alive, and then slowly revealed that the world itself was alive in ways nobody expected. It made us laugh and then made us think. It gave us silly jokes and existential dread in the same episode. It created characters who started as simple cartoon archetypes and grew into some of the most complex and beloved figures in animation. The Amazing World of Gumball is a show about family, about identity, about what it means to belong, about what it means to be forgotten, about what it means to fight for your existence in a world that might not even be real. It started as a comedy about a cat who goes to middle school, and it ended as one of the most ambitious narratives in the history of the medium. And the movie is the final chapter, the last piece of the puzzle, the thing that will finally complete a story that millions of people around the world have been waiting years to see finished. The screen went black at the end of the Inquisition. The world of Elmore disappeared into static and silence. And for a long time, that was all we had. Darkness and questions, and the hope that someday, somehow, the story would continue. That hope was not misplaced. The story is continuing. Gumball, Darwin, Nicole, Richard, Anais, Penny, Rob, and everyone else in Elmore are coming back. And when they do, they will not just be finishing a show. They will be completing one of the most remarkable journeys any animated series has ever taken. And honestly, I cannot wait to see how it ends. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the entire story and lore of the Amazing World of Gumball, make sure to subscribe. I have another video essay coming soon that I think you are really going to love. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.